Goodness knows you've been looking long enough. With the Volvo XC90, you've finally found what you've been looking for. A luxury SUV with seating for up to 7 people and loads of cargo space. Not to mention premium technology, including Google Maps, Google Assistant and Google Play. The Volvo XC90 is what you're looking for. Now at special run-out pricing from $99,990 plus on-roads. Visit Volvo Cars and discover why the XC90 is the vehicle for right now.
You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
News Talk ZB and Weekend Sport. It's that time of the year when Super Rugby pre-season hits its final stages. The season, of course, starts next weekend, or on Friday actually. NRL and AFL teams getting ready for the start of their respective seasons in early March. So what's the best recipe for a successful pre-season campaign? Let's bring in our coaching guru, Wayne Goldsmith, for some insight on this. Wayne, always good to chat to you. Thanks for joining us, as always. In general terms, how soon before a professional season starts should pre-season ideally begin?
Well, it's funny, and always great to chat to you too, my friend, that this is a really favourite topic of mine. Look, we know that in the AFL and the NRL, for example, the teams who don't make the final series, they're already back in training while the final series is going on. That's how it really is a year-round commitment at that level. If you're talking junior codes, a little bit different though. I'm a big believer is you've got to have seasonal sport. And I know that's not trendy or comfortable with a lot of the codes who want you to play year-round soccer or year-round cricket or year-round rugby. I'm a big believer for kids in junior codes that they've got to have an off-season, even if the off-season is playing another sport, getting on their mountain bike and having some fun or just chilling out with their friends. So there's a big difference between pre-season for the pros and pre-season for the juniors and the kids. But it would be fair to say that for the pros, it is genuinely a year-round commitment now.
But surely in a contact sport like rugby league, like AFL, like rugby union, there's the need to rest, to refresh, to recover, to have some time away from the game, isn't there?
Well, there is, and there's other applications too, Piney, like, for example, very, very common, that the surgical wards of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and all the major capitals are full of rugby league and AFL players on the Monday morning after their last game. Because if I'm the head coach, I want my players to get their surgeries done, so they're trimming their shoulder or their knee or whatever they have to have done. I want those minor niggling injuries fixed as soon as possible to give us maximum possible lead-in for doing rehab and having them ready to come back at full speed exactly when I need them. So for some players, they're almost forced to have downtime because they're having surgery or they're having a break. I think the thing we always forget, though, mate, is the mental side. Is, you know, footy players play because they love it, and they love it because they're playing a game with their mates. That's incredibly important. But, man, you just try being a professional player and having a camera in your face every time you go to a pub, or being in the constant pressure of media assessment, the pressure of having to perform, in rugby's case, in New Zealand, in Australia, maybe in South Africa and England at the end of the year, that takes a mental and emotional toll. I think the reason they've got to have a off-season of some kind is to get that mental and emotional refreshment.
So once you do get back into pre-season, whenever that might be, how much of pre-season, initially anyway, is about building an aerobic base?
Yeah, and look, this is the $1 million or the hundreds of $1 million question, I think, with all the players that we've got running around at this time of the year. The model has been usually those first 2 or 3 weeks relatively gentle, easing back in with the reintroduction of some skills work, maybe doing some easy running and gently coming back into it, and then progressively improving and increasing intensity, making things a little bit longer, more hard, introducing contact, which has got to be managed very carefully because they've got a huge season of contact. All those things are taken into account with the aim to have them what we would call job ready on the first day of the first round. Now, this is where I think it gets really fascinating, because for some clubs, they have, in all the codes, some clubs, their off-season is almost hellish. I've seriously been only fairly recently to NRL pre-season with players throwing up, training in full heat, wrestling, then running, then wrestling, then running. I've seen some incredible things. And in some ways, that element of the physical preparation is at a greater demand without the contact than you'd see in a game. So some teams really pride themselves on the intensity and the quality and the level of off-season and pre-season training. Others tend to be a bit more cautious, and I think this is the game that you play as a head coach is, do I get the players in absolute peak condition, ready to go on game one, or do we hold back a little bit and allow some game fitness to evolve over the first 3, 4, 5 rounds? I don't know. The competitions are so tough, Piney, and the points, a win is worth the same in round 1 as it is in round 25. I don't know that you can actually take time to build into game fitness anymore.
So basically what you're saying is that you need to be firing on all cylinders in round 1 of the new season.
Yeah, and I think the competitions, they're deliberately shaped, aren't they, to make competitions harder and tougher. There's no easy games in the NRL at the moment. It's become a very tight competition. The level of quality of games in all the codes has become that there's an uncertainty of outcome in far more games. There's no really dominant 2 or 3, 4 or 5 teams. There's a real equality in a lot of the codes, and I think because of that you can't afford to drop points. But then that's the game, isn't it? That's the challenge is, if I, for example, had a team and we'd had a poor season last year, the year before, we're down around the bottom, you would more than likely, and this happens quite often, and I would imagine, say, for Parramatta with Jason Riles, they would have done it, maybe Benji Marshall in the NRL. The teams that have really struggled, having an outstanding physical preparation is not a guaranteed way, but it's a highly likely way to improve your performance for the following year. But there's the problem, is that if you invest in this massive training load in the off-season, really intense, really focused preparation in the pre-season, and you might have a blindingly good first 5 games, you might lose the next 7 because they're so injured and so tired because you've just got it wrong. But one of the great things in all the codes is the introduction of sports science, of physiologists and strength and conditioning professionals and physiotherapists, sports med staff, who are monitoring training load constantly to try and find what's the right balance so that we can win games but not be overstretched or overloaded.
What a balance to strike. Off the training paddock, often a new season brings new players to a team, new members of coaching staffs. How much of a pre-season campaign should be focused on integrating new faces into your setup?
Yeah, really good question. Really good question. For the teams and the senior coaches who've got a culture, so Craig Bellamy, for example, in Melbourne in the NRL, and for teams where they've got a set culture, an experienced coach, and a group that's been together, the incoming players, incoming staff, generally have to learn quickly to fit into that system. So, if you're the Brisbane Lions in the AFL, Chris Fane, highly experienced, very experienced staff. If you were going into that environment, the Premiers, you'd have to fit into the Brisbane Lions way of doing things. That would be the expectation. In some other clubs, if you've been brought in as a marquee player or as a new coach with a high level of skill in a particular area, the expectation would be you fit into the culture, you build some friendships and connections, but you've been recruited specifically to make an impact. And there's an expectation that you'll not just fit in maybe socially and culturally, but technically and tactically and from a performance, you're expected to shake things up. You're expected to come in and be a bit of a disruptor and try to make a difference, because that's why they paid you to come in. If you're not coming in and shaking it up and making a difference, to a team that's battled, well, why would I have recruited you? So, yeah, it depends, I think, on where the team is at. If the team's got a very set culture, and you and I have talked about culture previously, that, I remember having a brief drop-in with the Crusaders a long time ago, and they used the term a Crusaders type of player. And it was a wonderful phrase, and I know Geelong have used the same term, the Bulldogs use the same term, is they said, we go looking, we recruit Crusaders, or we recruit Bulldogs, or we recruit Cats. We recruit people, coaches, athletes, staff, who are our kind of people because we know our culture's right. And we know that they'll come in, they'll fit in, and they'll make us richer and a little bit better. In some other places where they're less certain of what they stand for and who they are, they've got to target people who can make them better and almost give them the opportunity to be disruptive and make things different, because what they're doing, what's that old great phrase about the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So, yeah, what you expect from players and coaches depends very much on your culture and where the team is at the moment.
Just to finish, if pre-season doesn't go to plan and you reach round one and the team is not job ready, is not where you want them to be, is there time in season to make up for lost ground that you didn't achieve pre-season?
I think there is, but there's got to be great communication between the coaching staff, the players, and the support team, the strength conditioning, the performance analysts, the physios. Everyone's got to be on the same board and be talking about it openly, because if there's an issue, it needs to be identified quickly and addressed with a degree of urgency. Having said that, though, Piney, it's really important. So if you've sold the players the idea that the playing style or the type of game we're going to play this year is going to be really successful, our system will work, and you get to round one and you lose and you say, sorry, guys, we got it wrong, we're changing everything, it confuses the players. And if they lose faith in you as a coach, when they lose faith in their system, then you could be headed for an absolute disaster. So I often say to coaches and staff, you've got to have a what-if process for game one. What if we win and we dominate? All right, what's week 2 look like? What's week 3 look like? If we go okay, what do we do? And if first week is a disaster, what we do? So that if you like, their response to what's happened in game one has got to be planned, so that even if it's a complete failure, that there's a calm, cool, systematic process to turning it around. I often say to coaches, remember that players can smell fear very quickly. And if they sense that you had them training October, November, December, January, getting them to believe in you and you believe in the system, and then you dump it all out the door after one loss, well, they go, wait on a minute, maybe these guys don't know what they're doing, and it's every man for himself or every woman for themselves. So, yeah, you've got to have what happens in round one, really up to round 5, I think. You've got to have a plan for how you will respond to win, loss or draw.
Brilliant insight, as always, from you, Wayne. Thanks, as always, for joining us across New Zealand with your expertise.
Always an absolute pleasure, my friend. I'm back in the beautiful Shaky Isles in a few weeks. I'm down in Taronga doing some work in Bay of Plenty. If anyone's down that way, please come up and say hello.
I'm sure you will get quite a few people doing just that, Wayne. Thanks indeed, as always, for your time. Wayne Goldsmith, regular part of Weekend Sport across the year. Find out more about Wayne and the work he does and read some of his articles at wgcoaching.com.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.